Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Michael Hartley with Action Coach. What needs to pivot in my business, kickstart your day, get you refocused, because business is changing daily right now. Welcome to What Needs to Pivot, everyone. My name is Dr. Michael Hartley. I'm a non-medical type of doctor. I operate on business, and today's topic is twofold. First and foremost, it is mindset, and second of all, it is routine. And something that I realize that we don't talk a lot about is the purpose of routine. We talk a lot about doing it. We don't understand really the fundamentals of why it is so absolutely critically important to our lives every single day. So today, we're actually going to start to dive kind of into it to understand what that looks like for us. So when we get kickstarted here, I want to help us kind of refocus as to where we are at right now. And when we look at our path forward, we need to understand that step one was lockdown, everything started to take place. Then we get into training and teaching mode of our team to kind of help them understand what needs to pivot and change in our businesses. Now we are officially in phase three. We have a path forward, a clarity of understanding with specific dates as to when the country, and more specifically our individual states, are going to begin to reopen. So now we are in the warming up phase. Now we need to be looking at what needs to be done to prepare ourselves for the sprint ahead. So what do those things look like? And first and foremost, our mindset for the path forward for that sprint ahead is really important. And then the second piece is going to be our routine. What does our daily routine look like? It's why we say the default diary, the default calendar you set up, prepared mentally for the sprint ahead. All of these type of things are really going to be important. On the business side, we also have to look at the opportunities that we're going to have, because a lot of your competition will not have made it. Somewhere between 10 and 30% of businesses won't make it past the next 6 weeks. And then another percentage will start to fall off over the course of the next year. So your opportunity here is to first and foremost make sure that you have pivoted properly. Second of all, make sure your team's prepared for the path forward. And then third, you now have a plan to sprint. So that way, when you open your doors right back up, you're ready to sprint with the focuses that you must have right now. So let's talk about mindset. From chaos to control. We want to look at two things: turning a fixed mindset into a growth mindset. And if you're tired of restarting, then stop quitting. I'll start actually with the second one. So there's a lot of energy that goes into starting something from scratch. There's a lot of energy that goes into hitting the reset button on a business. And for a lot of businesses, this has been that moment, which means a lot of energy had to go in. I mean, so many of our clients sat there for the first 2 weeks and was like, man, I've never gone this hard, this fast before. And what's interesting is, if you built up the ability to run at that pace all the time, what would your business actually do? It's so interesting when people say, maybe we should have done this type of marketing or this much engagement or this much leadership all along. And it's really kind of interesting to say, man, well, if we did, what would our business actually look like all the time if this was the amount of energy that we just built up the ability to push out? And what happens is if you build, when you build the right routine, you can actually effectively do that. So fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Let's kind of talk about that for a second here. So a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is focused on avoiding changes. A fixed mindset is focused on giving up easily and looking at something and saying, well, there's not a whole lot of fruit there that can be harvested. So it's just like, it's slightly pointless to even put in the energy right now. It's looking at negative feedback and saying, nah, I don't need that right now. That's a fixed mindset. The inability to accept criticism when it actually should be there, and being honest with it, or feeling threatened by it, feeling threatened by others, feeling threatened by what they're saying and things like that. That's a fixed mindset. Versus part two of that is a growth mindset. A growth mindset embraces challenges and looks at them as opportunities. A growth mindset sees effort in the path forward and says, I may not see the dividends of this right now. However, 2 years from now, I start today, and that 1% increase, week over week, month over month, will get me where I want to be, down the road, more long-term goals and things like that. A growth mindset will persist in the face of challenges, will push through the end zone. It's one of those things where when you look at football, if you never watched sports, there's a handful of highlights out there, which is really interesting. When you look at somebody who was going for a touchdown and they start to slow up as they get closer to the end zone, their goal, the beginning of their goal, versus those who sprint as though they are trying to get to the end of the end zone, the end point of their goal. And so many times you've even seen people throw the ball thinking that they were already in the end zone, and yet they threw it away before they actually made it there, because they were just trying to get to the beginning instead of pushing all the way through. A growth mindset pushes all the way through, saying we're going to sprint through this entire thing. They persist. They learn when criticism is given. They learn from others that can help find blind spots in their lives. They don't take that emotionally. They say, what can I do to actually invest right now to make sure that there's a lesson that I can find and maybe even inspire me forward? Maybe even see the success of others and go, you know what, man, their success is going to help me drive to be better. Instead of giving myself excuses and things like that and living below the point, I'm going to take ownership of this and go, you know what, I'm going to use this to help myself build the path forward. So that's the mindset piece. Then we get into part 2 of this whole thing. So fixed mindset versus growth, tired of restarting, stop quitting, right? Be that persistent thing. Don't just try something for 2 seconds and then go, well, I guess it's time to quit. It's not working yet. Well, maybe we need to tweak some things to get them to work. Maybe 10% of it worked and we need to work on the other 90% to get it to work, if it truly can. So again, the purpose of this specific webinar, this specific episode, is 2 parts. 1 part mindset, 1 part routine. And we're really going to talk about the purpose behind routine. Because if we don't understand in full the purpose behind it, we're most likely to go back to the point just made, which is we're just going to stop it and try to restart all over again. We're going to quit it. So routine, what does this actually look like and why should we focus on it? So when we look at routine, it's one of the major phases in preparing for the sprint ahead. To build routine, we first need to understand the importance of it. So, why are we likely to stick or not stick, or be consistent or not be consistent with it? So one major reason behind building a consistent routine is to help calm our mind, which reduces the need for the fight, flight, or freeze mode that it can so naturally get stuck in. So your routine will help steady you. It'll help give you a foundation for your entire day. You're unable to perform at your highest ability, which you need to be in order to sprint, when you are in fear or stress or anxiety mode. And our brain, which is, again, if you didn't watch the previous ones, go watch the previous ones, because we talk about how the brain is the system, right? It's the hard wiring. The mind is what causes all the synapses and the thoughts and things like that. So the brain is going to follow the rules. The brain is always going to follow rules. It's the system's part and that follows what the mind kind of tells it to do. So the system that the brain follows is called circadian rhythm. There's a whole bunch of science and stuff like that behind it. And circadian is Latin, and the first piece of it means more or less. Circa means kind of like around or close to, and DN or DM means day. You've probably heard of carpe diem, seize the day, because diem means day. So what circadian actually translates to be is more or less the day, close to your day, the 24 hours we are given every single day. So what that means is that it allows the system that it follows. There are certain times where your body is going to react or respond, I should say, to the circadian rhythm that we are naturally in. There's reasons why we're hardwired to, naturally, the body naturally pumps in melatonin during certain parts of the day and reduces it from peak levels at certain parts of the day. There's reasons why, we get our deepest sleep at certain parts of the day. and why we are most rested and most energetic, and why we are able to produce the most types of things at 10 o'clock every single day. As an example, we have this system that our body follows. And so we must be able to prepare the mind for what the body is naturally going to do. So we have to be able to engage our mind with the routine as how it follows. Otherwise, it'll fall into that fight, flight, or freeze mode that it can so naturally focus on. So getting into routine helps calm our mind. It helps sync us with what our natural rhythm is going to be. Because what happens is, otherwise, if we don't, we naturally are going to go focus on all the fires that take place in our lives, in our business. That's where our natural tendency gets, which is why most businesses stagnate, because they're focused in the business instead of on the business, even just an hour a day. Benjamin Franklin has been famously quoted for a lot of things. One of the things he said was, early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. He also was famously quoted for quoting a German proverb that essentially translates to the early morning has gold in its mouth. And so when we prepare ourselves with the routine that we have for the morning to be the most productive that it needs to be every single day, we can actually do more with it. So whether you want it to or not, your routine will dictate the productivity that you have for the entire day. The way you begin your day will prescribe how you end it. When we look at athletes, the best athletes in the world, regardless of sport, you look at tennis, basketball, football, baseball, runners, when they get ready for what they are about to do, when a runner gets ready to sprint, they have a specific amount of workouts that they do weeks and months in advance, and all the way up to the stretches that they do just moments before they're about to run the race, right before they get into the blocks. And so when we don't have a strong routine at the beginning of our day, it's like a runner trying to sprint a race and having that headwind all the time. It's like a runner trying to sprint and sprinting against headwind while everybody else has tailwind kind of pushing them forward. And that's what we need to look at. There was a flight recently from the US to London, fastest speed ever. There's 3 in like the same 24 hours because of the amount of tailwind that they had. All the pieces on the plane were the exact same as they had always been, same number of passengers that they had always had. And the biggest difference that caused them to take what should normally be over a 6-hour flight and turn it into 4 hours and some change was the fact that they had that momentum, that tailwind behind them. And so that must be our focus, is how do we create this momentum in our lives every single day to get that tailwind to move us forward? Think about what your competition is doing. Chances are there's a portion of your competition right now that's building their own momentum. So are you setting your business up to have headwind, or are you setting your business up to have tailwind, to sprint ahead? You see, when we wake up and we allow the outside world and the notifications and the news and text messages and email to bombard us, when we allow that at the beginning of every single day, it consumes our minds. That is now where our focus is going to be. If we allow that to happen every single time when we wake up, it's forcing ourselves to get into a reactionary mode, a reactive day, a reactive state, instead of putting ourselves in a proactive state to seize the day. Carpe diem. Creating the routine needs to be simple, because it is simple. It's not easy. It's simple to do. So we must get into a routine where it will remove the distractions. You've probably heard me say this before. It takes your brain 23 to 45 minutes to refocus every single time that you are distracted. Every single time you're distracted. So think about how inefficient your day is every time you get distracted. How many distractions did you have last week alone? How many distractions have you had today already that have caused you to be less proactive, to cause you to be less efficient with your day? So let's make the shift. Let's make the pivot in our routine. This is why self-mastery is so critically important to your success. We're unable to manage time. Time is an ever constant moving forward. We can't stop it, pause it, rewind it, fast forward it. We can't skip ahead. Time is ever constant. So what we can manage is us, is ourselves. And the routine becomes our anchor for our life. Our routine becomes the anchor for the day, the foundation to which every other day will be built upon, which is why your routine is so critical. Those that just say, oh, no, I'll just get back to it later, don't understand the long-term ramifications that not having a solid routine every single day creates. I'll never forget, one of my bosses a handful of years ago told me, he goes, excuses are for losers. And in the moment, I thought that was really harsh. And it was something that he told his sons all the time. Excuses are for losers. And as I have grown, as I have matured, I actually started to understand the core principle that he was trying to convey, which is we must live above the line. We must live above the point. Ownership, accountability, responsibility. Below is blame, excuse, and denial. What he was teaching in that moment was to remove excuses. A lot of you are going to listen to this and go, oh yeah, Hartley, but I have this, or but this, or but that. I don't care. If you want to be successful, you will find a way to remove the excuses and take ownership of this and create your daily routine. There are all the excuses in the world that you can come up with, and chances are I've probably heard the majority of them already. Make the choice to remove them because you can. Maybe you have to wake up an extra hour earlier. Maybe that means you need to go to bed an extra hour earlier. Make that choice. Choose to take ownership of your routine, because if you don't choose it and you allow others to, you're allowing them to dictate your happiness, your mindset, your success. So take ownership of it. So we start building this routine. And one of the best ways to remove the excuses is to properly plan. At the end of every single day, create your plan for tomorrow. What are the most important tasks and activities that you must do tomorrow that lead you towards long-term goals that you want to get to? You got to have a vision in mind. You have to understand, where's this destination point that we're going to? What are the things that we must do tomorrow to get us towards where we want to be? And those are things that you're going to track, test, and measure. Because if the activities are not getting you where you need to be, we must shift those activities. Now, to know that they're actually not working, we have to actually track them consistently so we can see where the opportunities are. And before we just change what we're doing, we need to make sure that we're exploring, how are we testing scripts? How are we testing positioning? How are we testing engagement? Things like that. So as your daily tasks must be in line with the sprint that you're about to take, and the overall sprint must be aligned with the long-term goals. You see, every quarter is comprised of 3 30-day sprints. And if you've ever worked in the technology world, this is a very common thing that they go through. They go through these short-term sprints. And they have these sprints, and then they stop and they look at what was just done, and then they create the next sprint, and they go do that. That's what we want to do for you. We want you to create these short-term sprints that align with your long-term goals. So what can you do, whether it's on your computer, in your physical environment, whatever that might be, to help the next day start strong? Meaning, if I need to write something tomorrow, if I need to go document a system tomorrow, and that's in my morning sprint, then I may open up something on my computer and start it, and then shut my computer down. So when I open it back up the next day, it's the first thing I see. So I say, oh yes, that was the first part of my sprint for this morning. It's right there. If your morning routine is part of, working out and things like that, then maybe you need to set the things out the night before. So when you wake up, you don't have to think about it. We must remove the barriers, the roadblocks that cause us to not actually stick with our routines. We have to remove those things. So part of it is maybe planning ahead and saying, okay, so my routine in the morning is going to be this. So these are the things I need to put out right now, place out, set up on my computer, whatever that is. So that way I don't have to think about it when I wake up, and I actually stick to the routine ahead. So this is the first part when it comes to building your routine. We're going to dive into part 2 tomorrow. With that said, as a quick recap, when it comes to our routine, get out of fight, flight, or freeze mode. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. Remove distractions. Start putting things in place that help you move towards sticking to the routine you build. Live above the point. Remove excuses. There are all sorts of excuses out there. Just remove them. It's a bunch of nonsense that you're giving yourself. You're feeding yourself the wrong information. And focus on what's most important. So when you create that list at the end of today, focus on what's most important for tomorrow. We're gonna dive into part 2 of why this is so critically important tomorrow. And simply put, removing distractions isn't easy. And yet it's so critically important to your day being productive. Removing distractions is not easy. It's simple. It's not easy. And yet it's so critically important to your day being productive. Let's stop being reactive. Let's start being proactive, and let's take action every single day. If you're looking at an opportunity on how to get your business to the next level, to properly prepare for that sprint ahead, then you got to sit down with us. We have a complimentary webinar coming up on the 29th that will help give you a kind of a refinement of what your overall plan looks like. We have free webinars every other Wednesday. Some of them are on the short term, how to sprint. Some of them are on the long-term planning, how to prepare for the path forward. Regardless of where your business is at, if you're not planning and if you're not having somebody check your plan and hold you accountable to your plan, my question to you would be, how successful have you been with actually implementing it successfully in the past? It's been proven, you know, the percentage of you actually accomplishing something when you both write it down and then have someone hold you accountable to it skyrockets. You're over 80% more likely to actually accomplish something when you do both of those things. So join us during one of our in-depth webinars on how to actually plan. And then we'll sit down with you complimentary on how to actually take that plan and make sure that you stick to the routine your business requires for you to be successful. So get plugged in with us. Looking forward to seeing the BFOs, the blinding flashes of obvious, the aha moments that you have based on this part 1 of why routine is so important. So if you wouldn't mind, type into the chat, type into the comments your number 1 takeaway from today so we can kind of understand where you're at. If you have questions, type them in. We're here to help answer any questions that you may have. And if not, make it a phenomenal rest of your day. Start building your routine today. No more excuses. I'm Dr. Michael Hartley. I'm here to elevate your business and enhance your lifestyle. Bye for now.